Okay, everybody. Welcome to the October Planning Committee. Just note that the meeting is live streamed and recorded. As we've got observers here tonight, I think I should introduce the top table. I'm Councillor Roy Allen. I'm the chair of the Planning Committee. To my right is Natalie Osey, who's a legal officer, and Lauren Sturgis, who's also a legal officer, and Kate Goodall, who's the Democratic Services Officer. To my left is Mike Avery, who's the Head of Development and Place, Nigel Bryan, who's Development Manager, and Craig Miles, who's the Principal Planning Officer. Thank you. Can we move on to agenda item 1? Do we have any apologies for absences and substitutions? Councillor Ellis.
Yes, thank you. We have apologies from Councillor Sandra Barnes, and I am substituting.
Thank you. And I think the rest of us are here. Shall we move on to agenda item 2, which is the draft minutes of the last meeting, which are included in as item 2. I'd like to propose them as a true and correct record of the meeting. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. I've forgotten names now. That's a good thing, isn't it? Councillor Wilkinson, the Vice Chair. Bless you. Okay. Any comments on the accuracy of the minutes of the previous meeting? No? So I'd like to move to the vote. All those in favour of agreeing that the minutes of the previous meeting are a true and correct record, please raise their hands. Thank you. Any votes against? And any abstentions? Thank you. That was carried. Can I bring your attention to the Planning Committee protocol? Please make sure you're familiar with it. And we'll move on now to agenda item 3, which is declarations of interest, either pecuniary or non-pecuniary. Any declarations of interest? No, thank you. I would like to make a collective declaration of non-pecuniary interest on behalf of the whole of the Planning Committee in relation to items 5 and 6, as Gedling Borough owns a portion of the land within the plan for item 5, and item 6 is a Gedling Borough application. So let's move on to agenda item 4, which is land off Hayden Lane, Limby. We have 2 speakers, a resident objector, Sean Burrows, and on behalf of the applicant we have Robbie Locke, who is the Head of Planning and Strategic Land at Cora. The speakers will have a maximum of 3 minutes to speak, and there'll be no questions. If Sean would like to move towards the lectern, please. So you have 3 minutes, and I'll stop you when the 3 minutes is up if you haven't finished already. So in your own time, just turn on the mic and speak when ready. Thank you.
So I've come here today on behalf of myself and the residents of the Vaughan Estate and the affected streets in question, just to plead with the committee to really consider this, application to not go ahead, speaking for myself and the residents. When it comes to new developments and builders, the consideration of us residents doesn't seem to be taken into account. The impact the development will not only have a detrimental effect on us residents, its safety and reputation, but it will have a critical effect on the town itself and the amenities. Hucknall is being used as a bit of a dumping ground here for all the properties that seem to be right on our border. The residents area on this new site will be using Ashfield's amenities, with it being right on the line of our border. Hucknall's own residents cannot get a doctor's appointment or dentist at the moment ourselves, and schools seem to be at full capacity, so adding another 135 homes to the equation is only going to put more pressure on the services. Currently in Hucknall alone, there are 7 new housing developments that are currently under build. There's Wyburn Farm with plans for over 3,000 homes, Abbeyfields Grange, Sherwood Gate, Hawkers Place, Sandlands Park, Oakdale Homes, and the recently completed Papplewick Green estate that's obviously got a very large capacity of properties. The majority of these homes are still unsold, and with the way the housing market is going with interest rates, I can only see it getting worse for developers. Vaughan Estate is one of the most popular estates in Huntnall, with the majority of the residents being elderly. There's a lot of foot traffic through the estate with dog walkers, and with 2 local primary schools on the estate, it is a worry as a mum myself that the thought of over 200 vehicles this estate will generate pulling out onto Hayden Lane that's currently already used as a rat race for people cutting through to the other main access routes, putting public and children at risk. So a lot of people do walk via the estate to get to the schools with grandparents. The estate is already very over-congested and doesn't need more housing being accessed through the roads, and obviously it's already in a poor state of repair with the roads. I myself live on one of the impacted streets in question, so from a personal point of view, I find it very, very upsetting and stressful. We carefully chose our home on the basis that it's on a quiet cul-de-sac with beautiful outlook and safe for our children to grow up in. We enjoy an array of wildlife in the field, from deers, ducks to owls that are currently nesting in the oak tree. Properties on the street, including my own, have been adapted purposely, costing thousands of pounds to benefit from the outlook that we have and the financial impact this build will cause to homeowners having to make their homes private and secure is just unfair. Our gardens will be overlooked completely. They will incur a loss of light with how close the properties are to our homes, and you'll be able to see straight into the side of our properties and our gardens. Working in the estate agency myself for over 10 years, I know that all of our properties with the access roads coming down our streets will lose value. They'll no longer be homes on a cul-de-sac, and they won't have the outlook or privacy that they currently have now, and the reason that people have brought them on the street. It's not the developers that take the financial hit, it's us residents. 2 streets are required for access are made up of 3 and 4 detached bedroom properties, with the majority having 3 or more vehicles, which means a lot are parked on the road. I've seen some of the photographs you've got, and I've sent my own in because people don't see it on evenings and weekends. You can hardly get down the road. You literally have to wait for another car to come past you. So there's no chance I can't see construction vehicles going up and down on a daily basis without it being a safety issue.
Sorry, your time is up.
Right, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Robbie, would you like to approach the lectern? You also have 3 minutes, and I'll stop you when your time is up if you haven't finished. Please start when you feel ready.
Good evening. My name is Robbie Locke, and I'm the Head of Planning and Strategic Land for the applicant. I'm happy to be here tonight, supporting a clear recommendation for approval from your officers. This is an allocated site in your adopted local plan, site H10. And as you know, your local plan involved an extensive and thorough site selection process. It went through consultation and examination that established the principle of development on this site. Councillors allocated homes to this land on the edge of Hucknall as a sustainable place for new housing. It is a short walk or bike ride to the station in Hucknall, with a tram into Nottingham every 7 minutes in rush hour. It is close to the shops and services in Hucknall. The site is also ideal for housing from a technical perspective. The lead local flood authority agrees that the drainage is good, with no problems with flood risk or surface water drainage. The local highways authority is entirely accepting of the plans. There are no statutory environmental designations. The council's open space officer has confirmed that the level of proposed open space exceeds policy requirements. The council's tree officer is satisfied with the landscaping plans. Natural England have no objections to the proposals. There would be a large area of open space in the centre of the community, which will include a play area. In addition to this, a separate 4,000 square metres of open space and additional landscaping areas for drainage and wildlife habitats will all make this feel like a spacious and green community. We have included detached, semi-detached and terraced housing, ranging from 1 to 4 bedroom properties. The houses will be 2 stories, all red and buff brick under tiled roofs, to fit in with the character of the area. And importantly, 40 of these houses will be affordable homes. This is policy compliant. It includes both affordable rents and first homes for first-time buyers. This will create a mixed community, helping 26 families on the housing waiting list and 14 more young families currently struggling to find secure, stable homes of their own. I'm glad that we can help Gedling Council deliver on its local plan, with a scheme that respects the character of the area and that provides 40 affordable homes in a sustainable location with great tram and train links to where people work. I hope that the committee agrees with your officers and votes to approve this application this evening. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Craig Miles will now introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. Just to let you know, we've got one additional letter of representation, but all those comments that was received after the report was published have been addressed in the committee report. Also start by saying there's quite a bit to get through, and hopefully you're warmed up by the end of the presentation. I'll start by saying the site's allocated, as Robbie said, in the housing and adopted development plan, and it's located on the north side of the Greenwood Gate residential development. You'll see the wider allocation there from our development plan on the screen. Now, the western boundary of the site adjoins an existing residential area forming the main urban area of Hucknall. More specifically, the end of existing cul-de-sacs forming Dorothy and Delhi Avenue. The administrative boundary of Gedling Borough Council is up to the boundary with Dorothy Avenue and Delia Avenue. Now that's delineated by that grey line you can see around the south side and the west side of the site. The site itself measures some 4.81 hectares and comprises of a single agricultural field. There's hedgerows running around the perimeter of the site, and there's small clusters of trees. The site is identified as being in flood zone 1, which is a low probability of flooding. It's also in a very low risk of surface water flooding. It's not subject to any statutory environmental designations, and there are no heritage assets on or directly adjacent to the site. Now, what is proposed? It's a full application that seeks planning permission for 131 dwellings, together with 2 new access points from Delia Avenue and Dorothy Avenue. That's the proposed layout plan there, and you'll see adjacent existing layout for Sherwood Gate. It should be noted that the access to the south was only designated to accommodate the dwellings for Sherwood Gate, and therefore the site could not be accessed from Papelwick Lane. It's constrained by existing dwellings on each side of access and cannot be widened. The Highway Authority have stated it's not suitable for any more dwellings in this location. Could just move on to the access. Clearly, the application site crosses 2 administrative boundaries. You'll see here small infringements into both cul-de-sacs of Dorothy Avenue and Delia Avenue actually form Ashfield District Council. And an application has also been made to Ashfield District Council for them to consider the suitability of those access points, as well as to ourselves for housing. The application, therefore, the applicant needs permission from both Gedling Borough Council and Ashfield District Council, and similar to the Sherwood development adjacent. The proposal itself includes 1, 2, 3 and 4 bedroom properties being 2-storey in scale. There'll be a different variety of house types with detached, semi-detached and terraced housing. Just go back to layout, get a little bit of understanding of what's proposed. 40 of the dwellings are identified as being affordable housing, of which 14 would be affordable first homes, and the remaining 26 would be affordable rented dwellings. The layout has largely been designed around a centralised area of public open space, taking into account a loop road that would connect Delhi Avenue and Dorothy Avenue. Each dwelling would have their own off-street car parking space. Indicative landscape proposals show that there will be enhanced landscaping along the northern boundary of the site and the easternmost part of the site would be largely retained as a pond, mainly for drainage purposes, but would be landscaped. And there would be additional landscape along the roadside frontage. When I say roadside frontage, I mean between Dorothy Avenue and Delhi Avenue. There'd be a setback where it would be landscaped. Now, in terms of the planning merits, the principle of development is already established because we've got it allocated in our development plan. We adopted that in 2018. So this is not something new. This has been through the examination process to consider the suitability of these access points. Now, planning permission is submitted for 131 dwellings and the site's allocated for 120. But it's also stated in policy that planning permission may be granted for proposals with a higher number of homes subject to the overall scheme being considered suitable. Now, it should be noted that there's a shortfall of 45 dwellings on the adjoining allocation, which is the land to the north of Papawick Lane, which sought to get 300 dwellings in there. And this over-provision on this site would help to compensate for this reduction. In respect of design and layout, there would be a mixture of frontage parking, integral garages, and some to the side of units with detached garages. There'd be a good range of house types and sizes, including 1, 2, 3, 4 bedroom dwellings. The 131 dwellings to be developed would give a good density of around 27 dwellings per hectare, which is considered appropriate and similar to what's previously been approved to the south. Overall, in terms of design and layout, it's considered that the development would result in a scheme that would respect the character of the area and have an appropriate density. In respect of highways, to which most of the letters of objection relate, the site would be accessed via a two-way T-junction, which would be extensions of the two existing cul-de-sacs, Dorothy Avenue and Delhi Avenue. We've got a couple of pictures here. Eventually. That's just a plan showing how the road would connect into these two existing roads. That's a picture of the wider site. A picture of the site from Delhi Avenue. A picture of the site from Dorothy Avenue. Let's go back to layout. Now, internal roads have been designed with a 5.5 metre wide carriageway with 2 metre wide footpaths each side. The footpaths within the development proposals would tie into the existing pedestrian infrastructure along Dorothy Avenue and Delhi Avenue, which join Hayden Lane. A pedestrian link to the adjacent development of Papawick Lane to the east of the site is also proposed, but it's presently there's a footpath going up there to the site on the southern boundary through the area of open space. The transportation assessment submitted concludes that the appropriate level of parking provision would be available to serve the development, and it also concludes that the proposals will not have any negative impact on local highway network in terms of safety. As part of this assessment, they have calculated the trip generation on the site. Based on the figures extracted from the TrixBid database, the proposed development of 131 dwellings is calculated to generate 66 two-way trips during the AM peak and 69 two-way trips during the PM peak hour. So this would be through both Delia Avenue and Dorothy Avenue. And it would be divided by the two. A separate travel plan has also been prepared to encourage sustainable modes of transport for future residents there. Now, the Highway Authority have responded to state that they've considered the submitted transportation assessment and travel plan and have no objections to the proposals on the basis of the traffic generation from the site, and they consider that to be acceptable within the wider highway network. Therefore, subject to conditions, the Highway Authority raised no objections to the application and is considered to comply with LDP Policy 61. In terms of parking, the Council supplementary planning document requires that a total of 335 spaces be provided within the site. And 339 spaces are proposed. There's no concern regarding parking and access. It should be noted that access needs to be constructed prior to the occupation of any dwelling, and that would mean that permission would first be required from Ashfield District Council prior to commencing any works. We're getting there. In respect of amenity, in terms of amenity, the existing occupiers, the main impact would be through the creation of the proposed new access points via Delhi Avenue and Dorothy Avenue. This matter is already being considered in detail as part of the allocation of the site and the development plan through examination, where it was approved by the Secretary of State and subsequently adopted by Gedling Borough Council. Traffic increase along both Delia and Dorothy Avenue as a result of the proposals there would also lead to some inevitable disruption during the construction phase of the development. However, there's also a national and local requirement for housing as set out in Section 5 of the NPPF, and key to delivery of the development is the development of allocated housing sites. The layout of the scheme details dwellings set back from the boundary of these access points and in between an area of open spaces to be provided as a buffer between existing and proposed dwellings. It should be said that the imposition of a condition requiring further planting and the construction management plan would help to mitigate during the construction phase of development and limit amenity to existing occupiers. There are no other concerns in respect of flood risk or drainage, archaeology, noise, contamination, ecology, trees or hedgerows, as either sufficient information has been submitted or a condition have been applied, and these matters are outlined in a report. Finally, in respect of planning obligations, it's a fully policy compliant scheme, which means all contributions that have been requested are already agreed with the applicant. The planning obligations include the provision of 40 affordable houses, a developer contribution of £11,825 for improvements towards bus stop provision. In terms of education, a total amount of £746,672 is requested, which is broken down into contributions towards secondary education of £551,334 and a post-education contribution of £106,016. And this would go to the Hucknall secondary planning area, and it would be the schools in the Hucknall area that would benefit from this. There's also a special needs and disabilities request for education of £90,322. For NHS Primary Care Trust, a contribution of £70,985 has been requested and agreed towards the expansion of primary care provision. That would include Oakenhall Medical Practice, Wyburn Medical Practice and the Om Surgery. A library developer contribution has been requested and agreed for £4,611, and a local labour agreement has been agreed with the applicant, so what should require local workers to be used. There's also a requirement for contributions towards community infrastructure levy, which should be requested separately if planning permission is granted. In conclusion, you might be pleased to know the principle of development is supported by policy LDP 64. The layout, scale and appearance of the development as proposed would respect the character of the area and residential amenity. The impact on the highway network would be acceptable and adequate parking would be provided. Affordable housing provision would be acceptable and other planning obligations sought directly relate to the development in question. As a result, the application is deemed to comply with the policies set out in the development plan and the NPPF. I should also add, not only would the scheme accord with the development plan as a whole, but the balance of the material considerations also weigh in its favour. Consequently, Chair, it's recommended the application be approved, subject to the proposed conditions and subject to the prior signing of the Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Craig. I'd like to propose agenda item 4 for the purpose of debate. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilkinson. Thank you. Does anyone want to speak on this item? Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question to start with. Forgive me if I missed it, but the Bellway Home Estate, as I call it, and the new proposed estate, are they linked by traffic roads, so i.e. can cars pass from one to another or not?
Chair, no, they're not linked. The access for Papawick Lane, only related to the development of that Bellway Home site. And the capacity of that road was only for the Bellway Home site, so there's no opportunity to connect into the two.
That's fine, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ellis and Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd concur with Mr Miles that this is a policy compliant scheme, and it's been in the works for quite a while. I do remember when the Line Coast strategy and the local planning document were being developed, there were concerns from Ashfield that the effect this would have on the services in Hucknall. And I know the resident objector repeated that. And I have some sympathy with the problems of getting dentist appointments and GPs appointments. But I am reassured that in section 6.34, the section 106 obligations, where the amounts that the services affected have asked for to offset the effect of this development are being met with the additional funding on travel and 746,000 on education. Interestingly, I've never seen a send element on there. So that's a new one to me, but it makes perfect sense. And the 71,000 for the primary care trust to allow the expansion of local GP surgeries. So with those guarantees that the Section 106, they will be covered by Section 106, I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as Councillor Ellis has said, this site has long been identified as a site that is suitable for housing and has been in our local plan, which, as Mr Miles has said, has been subject to extensive consultation before being adopted in 2018. So I'm absolutely satisfied that the principle of development has long been established here. I'm happy with the development that has been put forward. As Councillor Ellis has said, there are significant contributions under Section 106 agreement, and I'd like to thank the applicants for willingly accepting those contributions as part of the scheme. That's quite refreshing because that isn't always the case, that applicants are so happy to accept it. So that's a really good step. I'm happy with the scheme as proposed, and I'm also minded to support it.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I wish this wasn't part of the local plan, and I'd rather have a greenfield, but it is. So I agree with what Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Ellis has said. You know, we're tied into allowing housing here because it's in the local plan, and it's good that finally we seem to be getting through with car parking, 2.5 car parking spaces per dwelling, I think I've read. That's good. And most boundary hedgerows will be retained, which is good. I do have a concern when it comes to biodiversity and habitat loss. I think page 26, 6.22 states that there'll be a 38% loss, and then it brings into our account our policy 18. I understand that more than 10% of the site will be green spaces, which is above our policy, and there'll be a play park, which is great. But I wonder what assurances we can seek to ensure that the green spaces do actually boost biodiversity and habitat, because you can have a green field, but if you have a green field with hedges around it and trees planted in it, the birds that were referenced by the residents and which is referenced in our report will have somewhere else to live. So I'm grateful of the 10%, don't get me wrong, but you can have 10% of an open field or 10% of an open field with other things in it which will help boost biodiversity. So what assurances can we have that that will come forward with that? Can we apply a condition, or have you sought assurance from the developer that they'll actually be beneficial green spaces to biodiversity rather than open fields?
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
What I've done essentially, Chair, is assess it against your own planning policy, which is set out in Policy 18 of your development plan. And that allows for a reduction in biodiversity value of a site where it's justified, and in particular where it's allocated for housing. In this case, they have tried to provide some mitigation in the way of hedgerow planting and in terms of providing the open space. But that is as much as we can ask for until such time as the government comes in with a mandatory 10% biodiversity gain.
Thank you, Craig.
So just to add further to Mr Miles's comments in terms of the emerging statutory requirement to provide a minimum of a 10% biodiversity net gain, we're expecting secondary regulations to come into effect in November, and the intention of the government, as we understand it, is that the statutory requirement for major planning applications will take effect in January of next year, and then for all other applications, the exemptions are yet to be clearly defined, will take effect in April of next year. So that's the current position.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make a couple of comments and ask a question, if that's okay. I know this land is allocated, but in the last 6 years, Hucknall has grown so much and has had so much new development that it's not quite like it was 6 years ago when it was approved. And I think in respect of health and the traffic in Hucknall, I think Hucknall is nearly at breaking point. So that's just my opinion. The other thing is I'm very concerned about the access on Delia and Dorothy. I just think there's going to be a lot of traffic coming through both them small little roads, and I'm surprised that Highways said it was okay, but if they did, they did. My question is, if Ashfield don't approve them 2 access points, then what will happen then? Thank you.
So the access points need to be provided prior to the construction of any of the developments comprised in this development. So if Ashfield District Council refuse the application for the access points, the applicant, so the developer, would have the right of appeal to the Planning Inspectorate. So you know that would have to be determined by the Planning Inspectorate, but we cannot prejudge any decision which would be made by Ashfield District Council. But the requirements of this permission, should it be granted by the Planning Committee, are that those access points need to be provided.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Chair. Well, and my colleagues have somewhat stolen my thunder, so I'll thank them for that. Just a couple of observations, really. I know it's obviously in the local development plan, as other colleagues have mentioned, but obviously we're here to make sure that we're happy with everything that's going in the plan. This is classed, I believe, in the local development plan as a rural site. So although it doesn't look to me like there's enough green spaces, if you tell me that there is, then I have to accept that. The main thing I'm concerned about is the same as my colleague, really, Councillor Walker. There's going to be 131 houses there, so that's probably going to be approaching 200 cars with only two access points, which look pretty narrow to me. And that's 200 cars maybe every morning, 200 cars every night. And then they've got to either go through Hucknall or they've got to go through Papplewick and Limby. And as we know, Papplewick and Limby is already at choking point. I know that the highways have said it's fine. As my colleague Councillor Walker said, we have to accept that. But I'm very concerned about the traffic now at that top end of Hucknall and obviously through Limby and Papplewick. So I just wanted to make those observations, really. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more speakers on this item? No. Okay, shall we move to the vote? We're voting on agenda item 4, and the recommendation is to grant permission. All those in favour, please raise their hand. Okay, thank you. All those against? Thank you. And any abstentions? Thank you. The recommendation was carried. Can we move on to agenda item 5, which is 53 Front Street, Arnold. The item will be introduced by Nigel Bryan.
Thank you, Chairman. Members will probably recall there was a previous application that was granted permission on this site, having been considered at the Planning Committee on the 22nd of February of this year, and the notice was issued on the 15th of March. This application is made under Section 73 of the Town and Country Planning Act to vary conditions 2 and 3, which in effect would relate to the elevation treatments of the previously approved building. The site, as you can see, is in kind of central Arnold, and this part of the access, you understand, is owned by the council, and hence the reason why it needs to come back to Planning Committee. And they're looking to basically extend and convert a storage building to the rear of number 53 Front Street. These are the existing ground floor plans, existing elevations. And this was the scheme that was previously approved back in February. The key change really is looking to make alterations to the materials on the first floor aspect, and in particular it was originally brick, and they're going to do the cladding onto the end elevation here also. And these are the proposed elevations here. And you can see just the alteration of materials on that first floor that is now going to be aluminium clad. But the merits of the application are very similar to what was previously considered. They're going to bring forward some residential units in a sustainable location, and the changes proposed over and above that were previously granted are considered to be relatively minor, and we're recommending approval subject to conditions as outlined on pages 48 and 49 of the committee report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I'd like to propose item 5 for the purpose of debate. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Pope. Thank you. Any comments on this item? No. Right. Shall we move to the vote? We're voting on agenda item 5. The recommendation is to grant permission. All those in favour, please raise their hand. Thank you. That was unanimous, so the recommendation was carried. Can we move to agenda item 6, which is Hillcrest Park, Hoyle Road, Calverton, which will also be introduced by Nigel.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for the erection of 4 industrial units on the industrial estate in Calverton. It is on land allocated for that use. As And you can see here, these are the existing units, and they're looking to extend each run of units here, along with altering the parking layout for these the site here. This is the aerial view, and this is proposed layout. There was an application that was granted that's identical to this one back in June 2020, but that has now expired. So in effect, looking to establish a new permission on the site that would be the same as previously granted, and it is on land owned by Gedling Borough Council. And these are just the elevations. You can see they'll obviously just follow along the same design and scale and height, etc., as the existing units. And in terms of the parking provision, they would actually only increase by one, but they completed a parking survey that indicated the existing car park is being underused, and there's plenty of capacity to absorb the number of additional vehicles the site will generate. And of that 41 spaces, this will include 4 disabled spaces, 2 electric vehicle charging points, as well as a cycle shelter for 20 bicycles as well. So having regard to the fact the site's allocated for industrial purposes and the parking that's provided as well, the scheme is considered to be acceptable and policy compliant, and we're recommending approval as outlined on pages 56 to 59 of the agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Nigel. I'd like to propose item 6 for the purpose of debate. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilkinson, thank you. Any comments on this item? Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, I'm one of the Borough Councillors for Calverton, so I welcome this development and I fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
I can't do better than Jane, but just to say that it's good that we're bringing forward local employment opportunities like this and boosting local jobs, and also well done on getting the electric car charging points in, because when I was reading it, that was the first thing that came to my mind of whether, if we're playing around with the car park, let's get some electric charging points in, and you've done that, so good work.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment on this item? No? Right. Shall we move to the vote? We're voting on agenda item 6. The recommendation is to grant permission. All those in favour, please raise a hand. Thank you. That was unanimous, so the recommendation was carried. Let's move on to item number 7, which is the creation of a working group to review the planning code of practice for councillors in dealing with planning applications and the planning committee protocol. I think Mike will introduce this one.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm delighted to bring this report to Planning Committee. The existing code of practice supported by the Planning Committee protocol is long in the tooth, having not been reviewed for many years. So this is an opportunity for this newly created Planning Committee to review the protocol, having regard to more recent best practice. And I think more importantly, just reflecting on how this planning committee has operated over recent months and even years to consider whether or not changes are needed to the rules. So it's recommended the planning committee agrees to establish a cross-party working group of up to 6 members drawn from the planning committee to facilitate a review of the council's planning code of practice for councillors in dealing with planning applications and the planning committee protocol. And secondly, agree that the chairman of the planning committee will determine the membership and provide details of that membership to myself. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I'd like to propose item 7 for the purpose of debate. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Pope, thank you. Any comments on this item? Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a quick question. So the Chair will decide the makeup of the working group. Is that individual members or is it so many from each political group?
There should be a political balance reflecting that of planning committee. The intention is that that is agreed among members, with the chairman ultimately determining who the 6 members are on that working group.
Thank you, Mike. Any further comments? Okay, we'll go to the vote on this item. All those in favour in creating the working group? Thank you, that was unanimous. So the vote was carried. Should we move on to item 8, which is an appeal decision for 34 Main Street, Calverton. This is for noting. Any comments on this item? Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased with this. I'm delighted that the decision of the Planning Committee was upheld on appeal, and as will be the residents of Calverton. I'm sure Councillor Walker will tell us. I looked at the inspector's report, and he goes to pains to point out that the committee is entitled to take a different view to the recommendation from officers. Now, I'll just say this is not something we do lightly, and it's not something we do without careful thought. But it is good to have it reinforced by the inspectorate. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. I was also on Planning Committee when this application was considered. I'm, like Councillor Ellis, I'm pleased that the inspector has backed up the council's decision and agreed with us. I am slightly bemused by the awarding of costs, though. That does seem, against the council, that does seem rather perverse, particularly with the reasons that have been given by the planning inspector, and is very disappointing, and I don't think is in any way a reflection on our planning, the officers in our planning department. I just think it's a bizarre decision.
Thank you. Councillor Catherine Pope.
I was going to make the point that Councillor Wilkinson just made. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, when I was a councillor before, this 34 Main Street was hanging around, and then while I've been thinking about being a councillor again, it was still hanging around. So I am pleased with this, but my only concern is still that this site is obviously a mess. It's been there quite a few years, and I would like to see some sort of conclusion to it. And I'm hoping that the developer is in contact with Mike and that something will come of this site, because some of you may remember the cherry tree and how that site was left for a long while until houses were put on it. So my only concern is, let's just hope it's not another 4 years before something happens. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments? Okay. Well, this is just for noting, so we're happy to note this item? Yeah. Thank you. And let's move on to item 9, which is another appeal decision on 135 Main Street this time. Any comments at all? Any comments? Councillor Walker.
We'll be saying that in our sleep.
Thank you, Chair. I only really know this one since I've actually been a councillor, but I've read it, and obviously I'm pleased that it's been refused, and I hope that the developer will find a suitable resolution that fits in with the village. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments? Okay, we're all happy to note this one. Thank you. Should we move on to agenda item 10, which is future applications? Any comments on these at all? No? So happy to note them. Thank you. On agenda item 11, planning delegation planning action sheets for noting. Any comments? No? Happy to note? Yep. And there's no urgent business, so I'd like to close the meeting and say thank you for coming.